Tonight, the Maryland man, whom the Trump administration admits it deported to El Salvador accidentally, or, it says it was accidental administrative issue, is fighting back. The attorney for Kilmar Abrego Garcia, slamming the Trump administration in a new court filing for doing, quote unquote, nothing at all to fix the mistake. And they say in part, I quote from it, defendants have already washed their hands of Garcia and his U.S. citizen wife, of his autistic, nonverbal 5-year-old U.S. citizen child. This is an outrageous set of facts. This is Garcia's wife speaks out about her husband's 3-week-long detention in a notorious maximum security prison known for housing the, quote, worst of the worst. She shares the moment she saw this photo and realized her husband was in the prison.
When I saw it, I immediately broke down because I knew it was him.
What was your biggest fear when you identified him?
I was scared for his life. He's not a criminal. My husband is an amazing person, an amazing father.
Kilmar's lawyer, Simon Sandoval Moshenberg, is now out front. And Simon, I appreciate your time. So how confident are you at this point that U.S. courts will go in this direction and be able to force the Trump administration to get your client back home?
The Trump administration has already admitted that they deported him recklessly, knowing that he had an order from a judge saying that he could not be deported to El Salvador. The question now is what comes next. The administration is basically saying, well, we've tried nothing and we're all out of options. We don't accept that. The very first thing they have to do is make a good faith request to the government of El Salvador to return Kilmar to our custody. They haven't even so much as picked up the phone to ask yet. So we figure that that's the first step, at the very least, that the court can order on Friday afternoon. I actually expect that that's going to be successful. From what I understand, right now, the government of El Salvador pretty much does more or less whatever we ask them to do. We say jump, they say how high. So I think if the government of the United States actually makes a real ask, not a wink and a nod, but a real ask to give him back, I expect that they will.
So, all right, on this issue of whether they would do that is the issue of who he is. So there's the law and due process issue, and then there's the issue of who they say that he is, right? His wife says he's not a criminal. You say the reason he came to the U.S. in the first place was because he was afraid of gang violence. But you know what Vice President Vance has said, and anyone who doesn't, let me just share a couple of the things he said about your client. He said he's a, quote, convicted MS-13 gang member with no legal right to be here. And then he said, quote, in 2019, an immigration judge under the first Trump administration determined that the deported man was, in fact, a member of the MS-13 gang. He also apparently had multiple traffic violations for which he failed to appear in court. A real winner. Obviously, one of those things is at a very different level than the other. But what do you say to the vice president? I mean, they're essentially saying he's a gang member. That's what we're saying, and that's the way it is.
The gang allegations arose in 2019 when he was working as a day laborer in front of Home Depot. It was an anonymous tip from a confidential informant. There was never any hard and fast evidence. When he was arrested by ICE at a preliminary hearing, the judge sort of took a look at these allegations and said, well, I don't know what's going on here, so I'm not going to allow him to be released pending his court case. But then he went to trial and he won his trial. He won his trial, and the government decided not to appeal at that time. The Trump administration decided not to appeal, released him from the detention center, and gave him a work permit. And he's been renewing that work permit and working legally in the United States ever since.
So then, so the Trump Justice Department says your client's wife is wrong to fear for his life because they've determined he would not likely be tortured or killed in El Salvador. Again, not something indicating that they're going to be bringing him home, but that they're saying basically he's fine there, don't worry about him. What's your response to that?
We have judges who make these determinations as to whether or not someone is going to suffer torture in a particular country, and so therefore should not be deported there under the Convention Against Torture. Yeah. This is the job of immigration judges. What they were supposed to do, if they thought that he should have been deported to El Salvador, they could have brought him back in front of the immigration judge, asked the judge to lift his order. They could have appealed. If they think he's committing crimes, they could have brought criminal charges. There's all sorts of legal proceedings that they could have done. What they can't do is just stick him on an airplane and short circuit all of those legal proceedings, preventing them from taking place.
So this case, has gotten some people to think about this maybe differently than they did before. You know, you warn in your filing that you just put out that this is about more than your client, right? You're saying that without any action here, it would show the government can deport whomever they want, wherever they want, whenever they want, and no court can do anything about it once it's done. And that's a really fearsome place to be. And a lot of people agree with that. Maybe people who politically don't stand where perhaps, you may stand on this issue. Podcaster Joe Rogan, right? He supported President Trump. He's been very open about that. He had this warning recently.
You got to get scared that people who are not criminals are getting like lassoed up and deported and sent to like El Salvador prisons. This is kind of crazy that could be possible. That's horrific. And that's bad for the cause. Like the cause is let's get the gang members out.
So, when you hear that, do you think your client's situation, his deportation, could make, other Trump supporters, maybe even Republican officials, think twice about what Trump is doing on deportations?
I certainly hope so. If nothing else, we hope that the rule of law is going to be respected from here on out, and they won't do this kind of indiscriminate round people up and stick them on airplanes without even checking twice. I've had multiple cases over the decades in which there have been erroneous deportations. It does happen from time to time. But in every previous case, as soon as we brought it to the government's attention that they had done it, they moved mountains to get the person back. What's new, unique, and terrifying about this case is that their attitude is, yeah, we made a mistake. Too bad for him.
All right. Well, I really appreciate your time, Simon. Sobering conversation, but important, and thank you.
They had no criminal records, and they got no due process. Yet some Venezuelan immigrants were still deported to El Salvador's notorious mega prison. Why? Well, it turns out the Department of Homeland Security is using a kind of handbook, the Alien Enemies Validation Guide. That's according to a court document released by the ACLU. It's a point system that is used to determine if a migrant is in Tren de Aragua before deporting them. Now, if you've messaged with known gang members, that's 6 points, apparently. Gang-related tattoos, 4 points. Gang hand signs, 2 points. According to the documents, an individual needs to have at least 8 points to be deported, and it shouldn't be based on tattoos alone. Now, these are some of the tattoos that DHS considers to be tied to Tren de Aragua. Trains, crowns, stars, clocks. They also look at clothing, apparently, as well. Quote, high-end urban streetwear, or even Chicago Bulls jerseys or red flags, even if not definitive indicators, according to court documents. Now, in a statement, ICE says officers rely on a range of law enforcement and intelligence techniques to identify aliens who are present in the United States without authorization or are otherwise removable, who may represent threats to national security, public safety, and border security, or otherwise undermine the integrity of U.S. immigration laws. Joining me now is Lee Gallant. He is the ACLU's lead attorney in the lawsuit against the Alien Enemies Act. He's also deputy director of the Immigrants' Rights Project. Let me begin with you on this. We've been focusing a lot on the idea of the potential for mistakes having been made and who's deported. But you say the use of the Alien Enemies Act alone is enough of a reason to question their authority.
Oh, absolutely. The Alien Enemies Act goes back to 1798. It's a wartime authority. It was not meant to be used during peacetime, not against a gang. It's when the United States gets into a war with a foreign government. That's why it's only been used 3 times in our country's history: the War of 1812, World War I, and World War II.
Trump claims an invasion is worthy of it, though.
Right, but that's not what's meant by the law. It's an invasion, a military invasion by another country. And what's being lost is that if they don't want these people in the country and they're here illegally, they have all the authority they need to deport the person. The immigration laws allow them to be deported, and the judge said they can be detained, and if they've committed a crime, they can be criminally prosecuted. They're trying to use this wartime authority to bypass all the due process.
Bypassing due process, of course, means they won't have notice or opportunity to be heard.
Right.
And the last part, an opportunity to be heard about something that they may not realize is the criteria that is sentencing them to deportation, essentially, tattoos in particular.
Right.
We are seeing that the checklist says that you cannot use the symbols or tattoos alone.
Right.
But how do we know that the criteria is even being followed as they say?
Oh, that's exactly right. They are not letting us see any of the evidence. They are not giving anybody an opportunity to contest it. We have no idea. And so when people started learning that their family members had been sent to a Salvadoran prison, as you said, one of the most brutal in the world, maybe for the rest of their lives, and held incommunicado, they said, our loved ones are not gang members. Why didn't he have a chance to show that? They've given nobody a chance to show it. And there is undoubtedly mistake after mistake being made. And we've put in expert testimony now showing that these indicators they're using, the checklist, is not a reliable way to say that this person's a member of the gang. Yet no due process, and they're ending up for the rest of their lives potentially in this Salvadoran prison.